If your power bill feels like it's rising faster than your paycheck, you're not imagining it. And it's not just inflation, it's not just politics, and it's not bad luck. It's what happens when modern life collides with an aging grid and a new kind of digital demand that never turns off. Welcome to the New Financial World Powering Tomorrow podcast, where we don't chase headlines, we break systems down. Electricity, technology, crypto, blockchain, and finance. Not as trends, but as forces. And I'm your host, Zach here. I appreciate all of you joining me today. Each episode, we connect the dots between power, money, and innovation so you can understand what's really happening behind the switch. Quick disclaimer, let's go ahead and get this out of the way so that way we can go ahead and go on to the major and important things for our episode today. This show is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Nothing you hear should be considered financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. Always do your own research and consult a licensed professional before making any decisions. All viewpoints on this channel are of my own and are not of any employer or organization. Now, let's get to it. If your electric bill jumped again this month, it wasn't a mistake and it's not temporary. Sorry. Power generation today is under real strain, and we all see that across the board. Demand is rising fast, not just from homes and businesses or just AI data centers, but also electric vehicles and the new digital infrastructure that runs 24/7. At the same time, older power plants are being retired faster than new reliable energy is coming online. And much of what is being built doesn't always produce power when needed the most, during extreme heat or extreme cold. That mismatch, spiky demand and other constraints on one side, and on the other side, inflexibility in supply on the other. So it's a core problem. When demand keeps rising, supply can't respond fast enough, prices go up and reliability gets weaker. This isn't just a US problem either. Some places, the strain shows up as blackouts. In developed markets, it shows up as a higher bill. Different symptoms, same pressure. When your power bill rises, it's usually comes down to a couple things: higher fuel and operating costs, right? But also billions spent on upgrades and aging grids and hardening them against extreme weather.
I'm going to throw a power question your way and talk a little about energy use. We know it's expected to increase, of course, as people turn up their heat when it gets colder outside and more heat is needed. Here in New York City, Con Edison, much of the lines for power lines are buried underground in New York City. Is that an advantage in a storm like this?
Yeah, for sure. Buried lines in a storm are much more secure. That's going to be better in places like California, which is working to bury its lines. That's better for preventing wildfires. And in a place like New York City, having the lines underground means they're less likely to freeze, get overloaded, have a tree fall into them, get knocked out in that way.
And demand is rising faster than the system was designed for. And that third one matters. Large energy users like AI data centers can consume as much electricity as a small city. They're plugged into the same grid as everyone else. So when demand shows up, the system responds. More generation, more transmission, more reinforcement. Those costs don't disappear. They get spread across the system and pass through the customer. That's why many households are paying more even when their personal usage hasn't really changed that much. And there's another human side that's often overlooked as well. The grid isn't just software. There's a physical portion as well. Millions of miles of wire, transformers decades old, substations built for a totally different era, and power plants. When storms hit, power doesn't come back on by magic or hopes and dreams. It's the line workers and the power plant personnel and the field crews out there rebuilding something you can actually touch. During some of the bad storms, hurricanes, freezes, and other extreme weather events that take them away from their family, and they're out there trying to keep everybody else's electricity on or make the repairs in a very timely manner. So what people are actually paying for is resilience and response time. As these costs rise, governments are asking a harder question. Not just how do we build more power, but who should pay for it, right? Which is a legitimate question and deserves a legitimate solution. So, in several regions, lawmakers are exploring rules that require hyperscalers, the companies running massive data centers, to fund some of their own electricity. The logic is very simple. If one facility uses as much power as a small city, plugging it straight into the grid pushes cost onto everyone else. So regulators are looking at on-site generation, dedicated power plants, long-term power constraints, power contracts, or island systems, that don't strain the grid at peak demand. This shift is already happening. In late 2024, Google signed one of the first corporate agreements for small modular nuclear reactors.
Well, Google, speaking of, is the latest tech giant to go nuclear to meet power needs for data centers and AI, striking a deal with a nuclear power startup. Let's get to Pippa Stevens with more on how big tech is breathing new life into the sector. Who would have thought nuclear is back?
In December 2025, Alphabet went even further, agreeing to acquire Intersect Power for roughly $4.7 billion. Not a single power plant, but a developer that builds large-scale energy infrastructure for data centers. That matters because tech companies aren't just buying electricity anymore. They're buying the ability to generate it. Now let's ground this, right? Let's take this out west. Let's look at Texas, which is a great example. On the ERCOT, which is the Electrical Reliability Council of Texas, on the ERCOT grid, we respect, residential electricity prices rose over 30% between 2020 and 2024. Not because people use more power individually, but because the grid absorbed population growth. And we all know how big the boom has been going over in Texas with the population growth. But now you're adding data centers on top and extreme weather events and massive infrastructure hardening. Now the ERCOT projects peak demand near 80 gigawatts by 2030, almost double what they expected of the previous year.
Big test will be Texas on Monday morning.
Why Texas is such a test? Is it because of what happened there a few years ago? Is it because of the concerns with the power lines freezing there? What is it?
It's partly because we saw so many deaths in such an intense power grid emergency almost 5 years ago. But Texas is not used to extreme cold. So when you have a polar vortex, pressing down from the Arctic like we have, that's going to just put a lot of stress on the state. The state's power grid is expecting a demand peak of 84 gigawatts. That's not just going to be a winter record, it's going to get close to a summer record. And that much demand is going to be tough for the grid to keep up with.
That's not gradual growth, people. That's what we call in the old investor world or trading world a hockey stick. Texas doesn't hide strain, they price it. And if we look at Florida, Florida shows a different response. But let's take this to old Miami. 305, or is it 304? It's one of them. Let's look at Miami.
Right now, the attention seems to be focused on the city of Miami. Movers and shakers in the cryptocurrency world are moving here, or at least thinking about it. Some say Miami could be the crypto capital of the world.
Because she or he, however, I ain't even going there. The place is a growing hub for crypto and fintech and digital infrastructure. Not because power is unlimited, but because constraints are visible early. Florida regulators have proposed a data tariff that requires large operators to pay up front for grid upgrades that require substations, transmission, and capacity. Those costs don't land on the household. That's not anti-tech, it's clarity. As electricity becomes more valuable, systems are getting explicit about responsibility, which needs to be taught across America a lot. But anyway, AI data centers are a different class of demand. A traditional search retrieves information. An AI query generates it, running large models, performing inference, and drawing power continuously. That process can use up to 10 times more electricity than a traditional search. And it happens millions of times a day. That's why modern data centers require dedicated substations, direct transmission access, and massive cooling systems. And increasingly, they're going to need their own power supply. Electricity has weight now. We're talking Big Bertha. Latency matters, capacity matters, reliability matters. This is where crypto comes back into the picture, right? Not as speculation, but as coordination infrastructure. As power systems become more complex, it's no longer enough to just generate electricity. You're going to have to track it, verify it, and settle against it. Who produced the power? When was the power produced? And how was it consumed? And who's owed what and when? Those questions don't get solved by more turbines and more wires. They get solved by systems that coordinate data and settle them at scale. That's where crypto and blockchain fit. Not to replace utilities, not to replace the grids, but to sit on top of the existing infrastructure and reduce friction between the participants. In energy and infrastructure conversations, blockchain is increasingly explored as a tool. They're looking at it to settle transactions faster, verify activity transparently, and coordinate across many parties without constraints and reconciliation, and automate processes that used to be manual and slow, but now different tools show up in different contexts. I'll use a couple examples so you guys can get an understanding, and you can do your own research if you're interested, or however you want to handle it. I'm just putting the information out there. Now, an L1 blockchain by the name of Hedera is often evaluated for enterprise use cases that require predictable fees and low energy overhead. And I've seen their name mentioned when it comes to, let's use them in the utility factor, more for renewable energy credits, tokenization of those. But that's about as far as I've gotten to where they were going to in the utility game. But I mean, who knows how far it can go? But that's where I've heard about Hedera being mentioned. Ethereum is widely used for programmable settlement and tokenized instruments, which would make sense, again, if they're trying to get into real world assets and you're trying to tokenize renewable energy credits, or if there's other energy sources that they're trying to tokenize as well in the future. Hyperledger appears in permission, utility, and supply chain environments. I heard that blockchain being mentioned in that configuration, also with IBM as well. Corda, I know we all heard about R3 Corda, or if you haven't, they're more in the financial sector. I've seen them mentioned. Corda is designed for a regulated system that requires privacy and direct legal integration. So what I'm trying to point at is crypto doesn't generate electricity, but it helps answer the hardest question, or the hardest operational questions that emerge once electricity becomes scarce, expensive, and strategic. That's not limitation, that's leverage. Now, rising power bills aren't just bad luck. They're a signal. Electricity has become one of the most important inputs in the modern economy. The grid doesn't move at the speed of software, but demand now does. Understand that. If this episode helped you understand what's happening behind your bill, share the channel and follow for future episodes. I appreciate each and every one of you joining me today again. Until next time, learn, adapt, prosper. And as always, people, stay energized.